The world saw him as untouchable. A man of steel. A self-made millionaire who lived in a sprawling estate surrounded by gardens as wide as a city park, with fountains that danced to the rhythm of the wind and gates that seemed to separate him from the rest of humanity. His name was Richard Hale. Richard had everything a man could dream of: luxury cars parked in neat rows, a mansion with golden chandeliers and hallways that seemed endless, and a reputation as one of the most powerful men in the city. But what no one saw was the silence of that mansion at night. The silence that pressed against him like a weight he could never lift. Richard was a widower. His wife, Emily, had passed away 3 years ago. She had been his heart, the light that softened his rough edges. When cancer stole her from him, it left behind a man who didn't know how to live with grief. He buried himself in work, in building more, earning more, achieving more, as if money could fill the emptiness in his chest. But there was one piece of Emily left: their son, Daniel. He was 12 now, bright-eyed, with his mother's smile, and a heart so pure that Richard often didn't know how to talk to him. The boy wanted attention, stories before bed, someone to cheer at his school games. But Richard only knew how to provide in the way he thought best, through wealth, comfort, tutors, and nannies. He was always away, too busy, too occupied to sit at the dinner table or listen to Daniel's day. That afternoon, Richard's meeting was cancelled unexpectedly. For the first time in weeks, he found himself free before evening. He decided to surprise his son by arriving home early. He imagined Daniel playing video games, perhaps with his friends, or maybe studying with his tutor. A smile crept onto his lips at the thought of finally spending some time with him. The chauffeur dropped him at the gates, and Richard walked across the marble pathway himself. The mansion's giant oak doors opened as he stepped inside. The air was still, the housekeepers quietly tending to their duties. But then he heard something faint, an echo coming from the far end of the hall. A voice. Soft, trembling. It was Daniel. Richard followed the sound until he reached the dining hall. The long table was set for dinner, as it always was, though Richard rarely sat there. At the very end of the table, Daniel sat alone, a plate of untouched food in front of him. His small hands were folded together, his head bowed low. At first, Richard thought his son was praying. But then he heard the words. "Hi, Mom, it's me again." Richard froze. "I know you can't hear me, but I wanted to tell you about my day. Dad wasn't home again. He's always busy. But it's okay. I know he works hard for me. I got a B+ on my math test, and coach said I'm getting better at soccer. I wish you were here to see it. Sometimes I feel like no one sees me." The boy's voice cracked, and he wiped his eyes with the back of his sleeve. "I know Dad misses you too. I just wish he'd talk to me. I wish he'd tell me stories about you, or just sit with me for a while. But maybe he doesn't want to. Maybe I remind him too much of you, and it hurts him. If that's true, I'm sorry, Mom. I just miss you so much." And then, quietly, the boy added something that shattered Richard's heart. "Sometimes I pretend you're sitting with me at dinner. That way it doesn't feel so lonely." Richard's chest tightened, his throat closing as he pressed a hand against the wall to steady himself. He had never felt so small, so broken. The millions in his bank account meant nothing in that moment. What was wealth when his own son sat in the shadows of his loneliness, speaking to a mother who could no longer answer? Tears he hadn't shed in years burned his eyes. For the first time since Emily's death, Richard let them fall. He walked slowly toward the table, his footsteps echoing. Daniel looked up, startled, quickly wiping his face as if ashamed to be caught. "Dad, you're home early." Richard's voice shook. "Yes, son, I'm home." He sat down beside Daniel, not at the head of the table, not in his usual place of authority, but right next to him. The boy glanced at him uncertainly, as though waiting for him to leave again. But Richard didn't leave. He reached out and took Daniel's small hand in his own, his grip trembling. "I heard what you said," Richard whispered. "About your mom, and about me." Daniel's eyes widened. He opened his mouth, but no words came. Richard's tears spilled freely now. "I'm so sorry, Daniel. I thought I was doing the right thing. Providing for you, making sure you had everything. But I didn't see what you really needed. You don't need a bigger house or more toys. You need me. And I've failed you." The boy shook his head quickly, his own tears falling. "No, Dad, you didn't fail me. I just miss Mom. And I miss you too." In that moment, Richard pulled his son into his arms and held him tightly. The walls of the mansion seemed to crumble around them, and for the first time in years, the silence was broken, not with loneliness, but with the sound of two hearts mending together. That night, Richard cancelled his dinner meeting. He and Daniel sat together at the table, eating slowly, talking about school, about soccer, and finally, about Emily. Richard told stories he had never spoken aloud before: how Emily used to laugh when he burned pancakes, how she danced in the kitchen when no one was watching, how she had dreamed of sitting at this very table with their son every night. Daniel listened, his eyes wide, a smile breaking through the tears. And for the first time in years, Richard felt his wife's presence, not as a shadow of grief, but as a light guiding him back to the only treasure that truly mattered, his son. From that day forward, Richard changed. He didn't abandon his work, but he never let it steal him from Daniel again. He became present, at school plays, soccer games, and most importantly, at the dinner table. And every night, he and Daniel would share stories about Emily, keeping her alive in their hearts. The millionaire who once thought he had everything finally understood what everything truly meant. It wasn't the mansion, the cars, or the bank account. It was love. It was family. It was the quiet moments of togetherness that money could never buy. And it all began with one simple act: arriving home early, and listening to the voice of a lonely boy who only wanted his father's love. So if you've made it this far into the story, let this be your reminder: time is the greatest gift you can give the ones you love. Don't wait for tomorrow. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Show up today. Be present today. And if this story touched your heart, subscribe and join us for more, because sometimes, a single story can remind us of what truly matters in life.